I'll start by thanking Barbara and Paolo for inviting me here to speak with you. Your project on migration and home looks fascinating and important and very, very rich. And I'm happy to be here and to share some of my own thoughts and researches. Hopefully it will be relevant and interesting for all of you. So I will be talking about homing and ruination, making and unmaking homes in the occupied Palestinian territories. And I'd like to start just with a very brief review of what happened in Israel-Palestine in the last few weeks. I'm talking only about November 2020. So on November 4th, the Israeli army has destroyed 18 homes in the Palestinian village of Khirbet Khumsa, leaving 74 homeless people. 2 weeks later, the military raided Fastay al-Tahta, destroying 3 homes of 17 people. Sorry, my usual office is under construction now, and people told me that I'm making too much noise. Can you hear me now? Is it good enough? Okay. Sorry. Destroying 3 homes of 17 people. At the same day, 4 homes have been demolished in Khirbet Halat Adaba. Another 17 persons lost their homes. In addition, the army has destroyed in the village toilets, goat pens, and a 2 kilometers water pipe, which was the community's lifeline in the desert. On November 23rd, the Jerusalem District Court has ruled that 8 Palestinian families from Silwan neighborhood in East Jerusalem should leave their homes and hand it to Jewish settlers. Another 84 Palestinian families from the village are facing now the same threat. The reason given by the court was that those homes were owned by Jews in the end of the 19th century, assuming a logic that Jewish ownership stands for more than a century, while Palestinian ownership was lost in 1948, and all the houses that were owned by Palestinians are declared as abandoned property and therefore expropriated and given to the Israeli government. Just a few days later, Israeli government has declared a plan to build a new neighborhood, Jewish neighborhood in East Jerusalem with more than 1,200 housing units. In this new neighborhood, Givat HaMatos, it will block, when it is built, the only open space that is remained for the Palestinian neighborhood of Big Safafa. So all of these cases are not just cases. They are part of a larger logic of what I would like to describe as not only discrimination, but rather the very basic logic of the political regime in Israel-Palestine, which can be defined as a regime of settler colonialism. And I would like to refer to settler colonialism as a specific type of the relationship between homing and migration, or homes and migration. They will try to understand what I mean by that. So I will go very briefly to explain what is settler colonialism, what distinguishes it from other types of colonialism. And then I will go further to describe Palestinian homes in the West Bank as part of this rationale. So what is settler colonialism? We can start by making or quoting a quite well-known typology made by Shafir, following others, it's not very important, between 4 types of colonies. So the first type of colony is what he calls the military or strategic colony. This kind of colony is is happening or happened when a state occupied another place, another colony, but without exploiting the resources, without exploiting the people, and without settling in the colony. Okay, so for example, Palestine was a British colony between the 1920s and 1948, but we didn't have here British colonizers, and Jews and Palestinians didn't turn into a cheap labor force. Okay, it was just used as part of a military and strategic logic of controlling other places. So it was just, so this is one type of colony. The second type is what is called the plantation colony. The plantation colony is the one that is based on exploitation of resources and exploitation of people as part of the place's resources. And while there are several colonizers or Europeans, white people, we can call them in any way that we want, that do live in the colony, they usually come to there for a short period of a few years, just to be part of the administration, but they do not see the place as their home. Okay, it is just like a short-term service. So this is the second part. The third and the fourth types of colonies are the settlement colonies. The first one is the mixed settlement colony. In the mixed settlement colony, characterizing mainly the Spanish and Portuguese kind of colonies, people did move to the colony in order to build new home. They saw it as a place that they are establishing, but the idea of the mixed colony is pointing at the fact that the populations have been mixed during the time. So if you go today to Brazil or to Colombia or to Peru, you can see all kinds of, all the rainbow between European people and indigenous people. So it means that the settlement was not based on a pure distinction between colonizers and colonized. The fourth type is the pure settlement colony. The pure settlement colony is what we will also call in a moment the settler colonial type. The pure settlement colony is based on immigration in order to create a new home, while keeping the distinction between colonizers and colonized, with limited exploitation only. Just think about Aborigines in Australia, the Native Americans in Canada or the United States. They were not even exploited. Okay, they were just killed or pushed into reservations. So the pure settlement colony defines the places like Australia, New Zealand, United States, Canada, and in a way it is also very similar to what happens in Israel, Palestine. And I would like to point at two or three important features of this pure settlement colony that defines the settler colonialism. Patrick Wolf has talked about settler colonialism. He's one of the most important people that studied the phenomena. He talks about the basic logic of settler colonialism as one of elimination of the native. The elimination of the native doesn't necessarily mean genocide. And it doesn't necessarily mean also forcing people to move from their places of living, although it usually happens. It is also a discursive elimination, a way of non-seeing the native, a way of cutting the connections between people and the place in which they live. So the elimination is this way of thinking that enables people to see an inhabited place and to call it terra nullius, an empty land, because the colonizers do not recognize the connection of the colonized to the place. So he talks about this logic of the elimination of the native, and stresses that unlike other types of colonialism that might end with the decolonization, settler colonialism is a structure, not an event. It means that the idea, the very discourse and logic of settler colonialism is part, an inseparated part of how the place keeps acting in centuries. Okay, and you can take a look again at Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and to see that settler colonialism is a structure. Okay, it is as important today as it was 100 or 200 years ago. Another researcher, Lorenzo Veracini, tries to explain the point of view of the colonizers and how the colonizers demonstrate their being in this place where the native was eliminated. And he talks about settler colonialism as a movement of self-indigenizing. For him, one crucial distinction between colonialism and settler colonialism is that the first aims to perpetuate itself, whereas the latter aims to supersede itself. That is, when the settlers cease to be defined as such and become natives, their position become normalized. Therefore, what Veracini is saying is that since settlers are non-indigenous, they are forever indigenizing. Okay, we can think it's a Deleuzian devenir, becoming indigenous. The question then is how to be efficient self-indigenizers. So I was arguing in the beginning that settler colonialism is about homes and migration. And I would like to take those ideas and to point at how settler colonialism is about home making and home destroying. It is about taking the sense of home from the indigenous people, but at the same time, as part of the same movement, making a home for the colonizers. And the attempt to be feeling at home, okay, to make their position normalized and to self-indigenize themselves is a way of homing. It is a way of homemaking in a place. And it's a psychological as much as a political movement. Okay, people want to feel at home, but of course, when they do so in the colony, they also legitimize the occupation and the violence. So settler colonialism is a political structure that is closely related to questions of home and migration. Homes, of course, are both physical structures and personal and collective attachments to place. Home is legitimacy to being in place. If people feel at home, I can tell you that today Israelis feel at home in Israel. So it is part of legitimizing. We do not feel as foreigners, we feel as homeowners. This is how people indigenize and feel good with what they do. But what is very important when we go to study not the general theme of settler colonialism in Israel, Palestine, or in other places, but actual homes, is to hold the stick of thought and analysis from its both ends. We should think both of homes, particular homes, actual homes, and at the same time to think about them being part of home with a capital H, or the homeland. It means that every home is emblematic to the large situation. Okay, it is something that you cannot separate, but still you cannot conflate one on each other. When I live in my house in Tel Aviv, I'm doing settler colonialism, but I'm also living in my own home. And these are just two parts of the equation, and we should treat both of them very seriously. In another place, and I would not have the time to develop it here, I tried to suggest an outline for a theory of housing and dwelling based on the fact that there is a lingual and disciplinary split, that different disciplines talk about homes and houses in different words with different concepts. They understand them differently. They think of them as separate objects, and they tried to do something that I'm not sure that they succeeded in, but to propose some kind of a relational theory that ties the different facets of the home and house together as a top-down manufactured object, as an ideal representation of ontological security, but also as a site of everyday lives and complex social relations. And I will not tire you with philosophy, but the paper itself is quite philosophical, a little bit of Heidegger, Foucault, actor network theory, even Illich. But the idea was to suggest to follow three questions. Why do people build houses and dwell in them? How they are built and dwelled? And what does it mean to build a house and to make a home? And I'd like to take these questions to the case study that I'm presenting here today. Okay, to ask about the three layers of understanding housing and dwelling as a top-down object, as an ideal representation, and as a site of everyday lives and social relations. So what I suggested in this paper, and I'm going to follow the same categories today, is first of all to think about the housing regime. That is thinking about the home as part of a broader system of planning, economy, national goals, but also of a patriarchy, of all the themes that sets our homes and houses. The second layer was what I called critical phenomenology. And it is critical because it is asking two questions and seek to find the gap between them. One is to describe the ideal home images in a given place in society, okay, because we know that on the one hand, homes are a shared concept, I guess, globally, and in all eras of human existence, but at the same time, we know that homes and houses are different one from each other, and that how people imagine the ideal home, the safe home, what a home should do, how many people should live in it, what are the relations between home and family and neighborhood, etc., etc. All of these change, okay, and they are contingent and not something that is ahistorical. So on the one hand, to have the ideal home images of a specific place, but also to study the home's actualities. That means what homes really do in that place. And we will see that in the West Bank, the gap is huge, okay, between what people want from their homes to be and how they are functioning in everyday life. And the third layer is the active dwelling or building as a verb, meaning to take those gaps between ideal and actual homes and see the idea of dwelling taken, of course, from Heidegger, but also from others, as a way of being in the world, as a way of setting the ontological security that is never given, but a way of placemaking, homemaking, which is always, always, always political. It's not only psychological, it is always political, not only in settler colonial societies. although there, as I will show in a moment, these things are much clearer. If you have any questions or something, if something is unclear, so you can stop me or I don't know, ask later as you are used to run those seminars. It's up to you. So I'd like to talk now about Israel-Palestine and specifically about the occupied territories and more specifically about the West Bank as a place of settler colonialism and to discuss the issue of homes and houses in those places. And one thing that is important to understand that differs the Israeli-Palestinian case from other cases of settler colonialism, it is the fact that there is a Jewish history in Israel-Palestine. It is a Jewish history that we can find in archaeological sites and in the Bible, in the names of places, etc., etc. And at the same time, in the last hundreds of years, at least, there are different populations that live there. So it means that the self-indigenizing takes a different path than the one that is made, let's say, in New Zealand or Australia. Okay, the Europeans in Australia, they cannot dig into the ground and say, look, we have been here first or 2,000 years ago. Well, Jews can do it. At the same time, Palestinians say, of course, well, yes, but other peoples have lived here as well. Okay, just open the Bible and see that before the Jews, you had many other nations and peoples living here. But today, we live here. So both parties see themselves as indigenous, and the other party as an intruder, invader, colonizer. Okay, in Zionist narrative, people talk about, not just people, no, this is what my children learn at school, the Muslim occupation of Israel. Okay, so Israel was occupied by Arabs, and now we decolonized ourselves, so to speak. And of course, same goes for the other side. So it means that the deep connection between people and place is even more complicated in Israel-Palestine than in other places. And the other thing is that unlike other types of colonialism, in the case of Israel, the Jews didn't have the mother state that sent them. It means that today we have two populations that have no other place to go to. Both believe that they are the natives. And this is how everything is presented. And of course, the settler colonial way of thinking doesn't allow sharing a place. Okay, it needs to be very decisive. So who are the indigenous people? Who is the native? And I really don't have the time now to talk about the occupation and 1967 and exactly what happened and the Jewish settlements, etc., etc. I assume that you know some, that you know the important things, but if something is unclear, of course, ask me. So what I would like to talk about now is how the occupation affects. Just a moment, sorry. The battery is low. Okay. So I would like now to talk about the issue of homes and houses and to run through those three categories that I suggested earlier: the housing regime, the phenomenology, and then the active dwelling. And I think that these three layers are very important to understand the situation, because without understanding how hard it is, for example, to build a Palestinian house because people do not receive permits, or how endangered it is by demolitions, etc., etc., it is hard to understand the experience of living within the house. And then it is hard to understand the political act of building a new home. Okay, this is why those layers are so important, and we should think about them in a relational way, in a way that they are all parts of the same story. They co-constitute the other categories all the time. So generally speaking, and I only have the time today to do generally speaking, since 1967, more than 5 decades of non-planning and de-development. What non-planning and de-development means? It means that it's not only the fact that there is no active planning of villages, homes, houses, etc., etc. It is it means that there is an active non-planning. There is an active de-development, an active way of blocking any way of developing the homes, houses, economy, etc., etc. Very few permits are given to build homes and houses in the West Bank. In the last 2 decades, between 94 and 96% of building requests are denied. Just numbers from 2016 to 2018, out of 1,253 permissions that were asked, only 53 were issued, all the others were denied. And we talk about a population of more than 2.5 million people. Okay, so 53 building permits are, of course, nothing. And we can understand why people do not even bother to submit the file, okay, to ask for permission. So it means that out of those more than 1,200 permissions that have been asked, we can assume that another thousands of houses were built without even asking. So it means that tens of thousands of houses in the West Bank are now under the threat of demolition. They were built illegally because you cannot build legally. And home demolitions, if because the houses were illegally built, or because of some punitive act towards people that were suspected by making terror attacks, or as part of military raids and wars. Until 2019, more than 55,000 houses were demolished in the occupied Palestinian territories. This refers only to fully destroyed homes and houses. There are tens of thousands of other homes that still stand but are damaged, or half of them are destroyed, etc., etc. And again, as I said, at least the same number are homes that are unstable because they can be destroyed every day. Israel, as I showed in the beginning, destroys between a few tens to few hundreds of homes every year as part of its law enforcement. I'll move to the idea of critical phenomenology. So the first layer was to understand that many homes, the majority of homes in the West Bank, are considered illegal. But it's not only the fact that they can be demolished. I mean, it's not only the demolition itself, it is living in a home that you do not know whether to invest in or not, because there is a demolition issue that is lying on the home. And it might be like that for 20 or 30 years and nothing happens, or one day the bulldozer can come and destroy your home. But at the same time, people living in those homes. And we cannot reduce their lives only to being objects of the occupation. So if we want to go and ask, what does a home mean for Palestinian people? So I'm talking about qualitative studies that have been done. For example, Bri Ekison or Christopher Harker, Nadira Shelhov Kevrutian, and others. They define several ways of understanding homes. First of all, home is a shelter, a site of family practices, a center of identity, and a place of protection. This is the ideal home, but this is how people still conceive their homes, as threatened as they are. At the same time, because of the occupation, because of the curfews, the closures, and the fact that people are forced to be in their homes sometimes more than they would have wanted to be. And I think that we can imagine today with the COVID situation, the stay home, right? We don't always want to be at home. So home is also a cage. It is a site of patriarchy and familial surveillance and control. People talk about the lack of air and light, especially in refugee camps that are very, very dense. So people that must stay 8 people in one room for days and weeks, they talk about being choked in the home. People talk about the home is unstable due to demolition threat. They talk about the home that we do not know whether to invest in or not. Should I buy a new sofa or not? Should I plant a new tree or not? And then the home is porous and indefensible in front of the occupation apparatuses. This is mainly about the Israeli military breaking into homes. The Israeli soldiers break into homes for several reasons. They do it to arrest people. And I should state that it's not only to catch very dangerous terrorists, but many times a 12-year-old killed that was sorry. I maybe move to the other wall and make less noise. Can you still see me? I hope it would make it better. We always share the space with others. This is part of homemaking.
Yeah, you have to move as well.
Yes, exactly. Yes, but this is voluntary. It's okay. So, so sometimes it's to take children that were that someone said that they threw stones at the soldiers. Many times the army just invades homes as part of training. Okay, they train soldiers by breaking in innocent homes because it is less dangerous. Okay, so if you want to be good at catching terrorists, so why don't you invade quiet families for 20 times and then you learn how to do it when you need to do it. As part of what is called in the jargon, military jargon, mapping. It means just entering into homes. By the way, all of these invasions that I now describe are made at night, between midnight and 5 a.m. So mapping is just gathering information without any suspicion. So it's just that we want to know how many people live here and how the house looks like. So we come 30 soldiers and break the door and go inside. And I'd like to, okay, so this in a way breaks the dichotomy between home owning and homelessness, because the home is not stable, because we have home, but it's not as we are hoping it to be. I can just give you several examples from Hebron, and Hadil is here. Hadil is a former student of mine and today my research partner. And so the interviews were collected by Hadil, but I will also bring several testimonies from a recent, hi Hadil, from recent testimonies that were published in a report by the Israeli NGO Yesh Din. So first of all, Hebron is divided H2, there is H1 area that is under Palestinian management and control, and H2 that is under the military occupation. And we can see that between October 2015 and the beginning of 2019, 75% of the houses in H2 have been searched, or have been invaded at one point or another. 44% of them, roof or other part of the house was temporarily occupied. It means that the soldiers took part of the house to build there some kind of a military base for some time. We can see how, if we talked about feeling in a cage, so this is a photo from H2, you can see how the front doors are sealed by military order. The windows are caged in order to protect the Palestinian inhabitants from settlers' violence, and the doors are a canvas for racist graffiti against Palestinians. So it is very sealed off. The only exits are from the rear side of the home. Okay, the people cannot go to the main street, which is forbidden for Palestinian movement. So Hiba talked about one experience. Her house is located near the mosque Al-Haram al-Ibrahimi, and she says that the army always used the roof of the house as a military point. And she talks about one experience in which the army broke into the home and just blew the doors and blew the full the second floor completely. I don't have a lot of time, so let me just go a little bit faster. So we can see how people choose to close their personal space. I've asked for 2 of my windows to be blocked with cinder blocks. My husband asked an iron worker to put bars on our doors. The iron worker told him it's a home, not a prison, but my husband told him my wife is constantly afraid and wants to turn the house into her own prison to feel safe. This is from this report that I was talking about. But Nuha told that due to the great fear of settlers taking over the house, she doesn't leave the house, okay, even not to visit the family. So people stay in their homes, caged or having their homes broken into. But talking only about the experience of victimhood would be politically as well as factually wrong, because people are not only objects of top-down mechanisms as powerful as they would be. And this is why I would like to turn now to the last category, which is the active dwelling, which I would like to talk about through the concept of sumud. Sumud in Arabic is adhering or steadfastness. It is the choice to keep living in one's home or in one's place despite the hardships, and to do it as part of a political act that cannot be separated from the Palestinian history of the Nakba, of the demolition and the settler colonialism. So if Amal Jamal talks about the Palestinian home as a homeless home, a place that is always on the move, then making a home is putting roots in the ground. And Sumud, as explained by a director of cultural NGO in a refugee camp, is continuing living in Palestine, laughing, enjoying life, falling in love, getting married, having children, building a house, a beautiful one, and thinking that we are here to stay, even when the Israelis are demolishing this house, and then build a new and even more beautiful one than before. That is also sumud. The time here is sumud. To reclaim that you are a human being and defending your humanity is sumud. And we can see how the ruination and homing are so closely related. They co-constitute each other. Making a home is political because of the constant ruination, because of the constant unmaking of homes. And then ruined homes turned to be into a public space. For example, this is from Calandia, and thank you, Handel, for the photos, where the houses that you can see on the right side have been demolished a few years ago. And the people of the village chose to keep the ruins, not to take them off as a kind of a symbol, but also to build this tent that makes the private place, the home, to be a public square after the ruination. And today it serves for Friday prayers, for women gathering, and for children festival. So in a place where to exist is to resist, making a home is a political act. And what we need is to think about, as we talked earlier, about the relation between the home in capital H and the home in small h, and to see how homes are emblematic to the political story. To think also about resistance and about the ways in which the small sumud, meaning to keep on living in a place, even if it is half-ruined, even if it is porous, even if it is indefensible, and to see how this small sumud is part of the big sumud, how powerlessness is made into power, and how the everyday life is political when we talk about secular colonial contexts. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope it was interesting.